Hi. Good morning, everybody. Hello, my name is Sarah Schaefer Brown. I am the Sustainable and Resilient Communities Extension Professional for Nassau County. Welcome to the first session of the Annual Sustainable and Resilient Communities Workshop. This session will focus on the Sustainable and Resilient Communities Assistance Programs. This session will provide an overview of the assistance programs that we offer and feature communities who have successfully utilized these programs to provide grant writing assistance, advance project plans, build capacity, and also secure competitive grant funding. So let's get started here. So we are part of a team. So I have my colleagues on today. As I said, represent Nassau County. We work together across the Long Island Sound coastal boundary to work locally within our communities. So we also have here today Elizabeth Hornstein, who is the SRC for Suffolk County, Sarah Powell, who is the SRC for Westchester County, Deb Viscu-Abibu, who is the SRC for Western Connecticut, and Sarah Schechter, who is the SRC for Eastern Connecticut. We're also very excited to announce that we are hiring or have hired a new person to cover the Bronx and Queens portion of the Long Island Sound coastal boundary. His name is Ben Goldberg. He's going to be joining us in January, and we're really excited to bring him on and provide support to those areas of the Long Island Sound region. So just a reminder for all of you, we do have a lot of people in this session today, so please keep yourself muted, keep your video off unless you're a presenter, so we can save bandwidth for everybody. Please put any questions or comments in the chat. We will have a lot of content to share with you today, and we'll do our best to answer all of the questions as time allows. But if needed, we'll follow up after the webinar if there's anything we're not able to answer. As I've said, the session will be recorded and made available after, along with materials and resources that you can look at to reference. And we'll also be collecting your feedback through some interactive polls throughout this session. So the first poll we have is a question, where are you joining us from today? So in order to participate in this poll, this is a poll everywhere poll, you can join on your computer by clicking the link that was just put in the chat to the pollev.com//listres to answer. It'll open a window in your browser, and then you can click on the map and indicate where you're joining us from. And it's a live map, so your answer will show up automatically. You can also participate via text by texting LIST-RES to 22333, and then wait until you receive a text back notifying you that you've joined the session before you send in your answer. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. This map does not function with the text option. But for the rest of our questions in this session, you'll be able to participate over your phone as well using the text option. Looks like we got a good wide range of people joining us today. Thank you. Slide. Okay. So the next question we have is to please indicate the sector that best represents you, so we can get a sense of who is here today. So are you from federal or state government, indigenous nation or community, local government, nonprofit, watershed organization, community group, consultant, from academia, interested individual, or if none of these categories capture your sector, you can just type it in the chat. So it looks like we have a lot of local government, nonprofits representation here. Federal and state government as well, some consultants. Responses, really great. So it looks like we mostly have local government and nonprofits joining us. Okay, and then so our last question before we get into content is how familiar are you with our assistance programs? So that's either the Long Island Sound Resilience Grant Writing Assistance Program or the Long Island Sound Resilience Planning Support Program. Are you really familiar? You know, you've either applied or reviewed the applications in the past. You're somewhat familiar. You know they exist, but you know, you want a little bit more information on how they work. Or, you know, have you never heard of them and you're here to learn? All right, great. So it looks like most of you are, you know, somewhat familiar, interested in learning more, and then maybe a tie with the other categories of very familiar or not familiar at all. And that's perfect. I think we want a mix of people on this call to kind of share their experiences and, you know, share answers with all of you if you're looking for more detail. All right, so now into our presentation. So some of you are aware, but we are supporting the larger efforts of the Long Island Sound Study, which is the National Estuary Program created by the US EPA. It's a partnership to protect and restore the sound and its waters. It's a bi-state partnership that was formed in 1985, consisting of federal and state agencies, user groups, concerned stakeholders, dedicated to restoring and protecting Long Island Sound. The program is guided by four main goals, and these goals are actually being revised currently as the management plan. The CCMP is under revision right now. So as proposed, those new goals will focus on clean waters and healthy watersheds, thriving habitats and abundant wildlife, informed and engaged public, and sustainable resilient communities. And our team is focused on that last goal, sustainable and resilient communities. Um, and so our goal is really to empower communities to plan for and respond to environmental challenges in ways that prioritize well-being for all. So we have kind of three main focuses, you know, supporting informed decision makers, making sure information is distributed and resource managers and people within the watershed understand the impacts of climate change and what can be done. We support community-driven resilience planning and also resilience initiative implementation. And so with the release of the updated CCMP, there will be more information on specifically how we're envisioning that plan to support these actions and goals. And we also released earlier this year our Long Island Sound Resilience Resource Hub. This is a one-stop shop for planning, learning, and implementing climate resilient focused projects. So please check this website out if you have not already. There's a link in the chat to learn a little bit more. And so within this website, if you haven't figured this out already, we have a cool funding database where you can identify the available funding opportunities that are out based on where you live, where your project is, what phase of implementation you're in, and you know what types of funding you're looking for. So you can find that by going to the home page, going over on the top tab bar, clicking on our resources and tools tab, and it's within that drop down the funding database. So one of the main things I'm going to talk about today is our SRC Resilience Assistance Programs. You can scan this QR code to learn little bit more, or you can find it on our website under Assistance Programs. This is a graphic on the right-hand side of kind of the differences between our resilience assistance programs and might help you guide which one you would like to take advantage of. The grant writing assistance program and the planning support program were created by our team to assist with the development of sustainability and resilience focused projects that will have an impact on a community or communities within or partially within that Long Island Sound coastal boundary. So that area outlined in pink. And so I'm going to first cover our Long Island Sound Resilience Planning Support Program. New York Sea Grant and Connecticut Sea Grant received funding through Long Island Sound Study to administer this program. And this program focuses on providing assistance to New York and Connecticut communities to help identify and develop sustainability and resilience focused projects. This program aims to help communities assess local climate risks, conceptualize project ideas, and conduct preliminary planning efforts in order to be well positioned to access funding to design and implement successful sustainability and resilience focused projects. And at the conclusion of this program, we envision that awardees will be ready to seek funding for their resilience focused project. Our first round was launched October 16th of last year and closed December 15th. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on that first round in a little bit. And then our second round was just opened on Friday, December 6th. So if you haven't seen that announcement, please go to our assistance program page to learn more. It will close on February 7th. The award amount is, in our first round, our awards were between $35,000 and $115,000 for each project. And I'll just note that no funds go directly to the awardee. The funds are reimbursed directly to the contractor that's hired to support that community. There is no match required, and you can submit an expression of interest through our Google form, which is linked right on our assistance program page. Email an application form through our Gmail account, or print out, fill out the application and mail it to us. So the types of projects that we are looking to support with this program is climate change risk and or vulnerability assessment, strategy development, project prioritization, preliminary community engagement, or project feasibility or conceptual design. And the expression of interest is very simple. We are really just looking for the name of your organization or municipality, address, point of contact, provide an overview of what you would like to accomplish, what support you need, provide a location for where that support is needed. All of these, any support that we provide needs to be within, to benefit a community that's within that coastal boundary. So that's important that you identify that location. And then, a little more information about how this assistance program will advance sustainability and resilience. How will this assistance aid you in addressing environmental justice concerns? List partners or community or stakeholder engagement that's been done so far. And if you have any additional documentation, like a quote or additional materials, reports that have been done in the past, that information is also welcome so we can understand your needs. So this is a timeline that's included in the request for expression of interest. Basically, we review the expressions of interest that are submitted by February 7th. We review which ones meet our criteria and would be a good fit for our program. And then we put out a request for qualifications to competitively procure contractors to provide the support that you need. And so that contracting process will likely happen April through June of 2025. And then officially, the communities, organizations that are supported with this program would get an award notification, and that contract would anticipate to start in summer or fall of 2025. And this is just a little bit more information about how the program is established to support communities with that contractor. It's really a collaborative process. The contractor will work with the awardee directly, as if that contractor is your own. And New York Sea Grant and Connecticut Sea Grant are there as a facilitator and administrator of those funds. So this is just a little bit more information to reiterate how this works. How do you apply? You can either submit an expression of interest Google form, fill out the expression of interest form document and email that to us, or fill out that document and mail it to us. Is there guidance on how to fill out the expression of interest form? Yes, we created a example, so you can feel free to look at that for the level of detail that we're looking for within those expressions of interest. And are groups outside of the coastal boundary able to apply? The project must impact a community that's within that coastal boundary. So if your organization's office is not located within that boundary, as long as the project is impacting a community or communities within the coastal boundary, then it would be eligible for this support. We anticipate being able to support between 10 and 20 communities through this program this year, and there's up to $1 million available for this program to spread out across the region. The contractors that we hire are procured competitively through Cornell University and UConn, University of Connecticut. And so the contractors that are selected are, qualified contractors that will respond to this request for qualifications and meet all of the requirements that we will put in that request for qualifications. And they'll, as I said, work with the awardees to actually complete the project and deliver the support to you. And who can submit an expression of interest? It's a pretty broad group. So I'm not going to read on all of the names on this slide. You can read it in a little bit more detail on your own. It's also included in the RFEI. But I did just want to highlight that one expression of interest is accepted per applicant. And since we had opened a first round already, priority will be given to applicants who have not previously received support through the program. All right, so we have, as I said, opened our first round of awardees last year, and we have now been able to support 15 projects across the watershed. There are 10 in New York and 5 in Connecticut, and the total support that we've been able to provide is a little over $1 million. You can find more information about all of these projects, the main point of contact, what contractor they're using, and then a project description. If you go to the assistance program page, there's an interactive map that you can click on and learn a little bit more. We also held a press event on Friday at the Rye-Town Park, which is actually an awardee of our planning support program. It was a great event, and we were able to celebrate the 15 projects that we're supporting through this first round and also announce the second round of the project. On our website, you'll also be able to find the award slate, which is a multi-page document which goes into a little bit more detail on the projects that were supported in this first round. All right, so without further delay, I am going to get into our first session. So we're going to hear a little bit more from a couple of the planning support program projects. Each of these presenters are going to provide a brief overview of their project and tell a story of what they're going to do next after their project is complete. So first, I'd like to introduce Erin Mannix, who's a town planner for the town of Madison, who's going to present on a climate resiliency plan for Madison, Connecticut.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Erin Mannix. I'm the town planner in Madison, Connecticut, and happy to be here this morning with all of you to kind of share what our approach and our application process was to the planning program funding. We did receive funding in the first round, specifically to create a community climate resilience plan for our town. Our consultants that we're working with are formerly FHI Studio, now known as IMEG, and Resilient Land and Water. The total amount of our funding for this plan is $50,000. So I'll walk you through a little bit about our community and what specifically we were looking to do and how we're approaching this plan update. Madison is located in South Central Connecticut, along the shore of Long Island Sound. We're approximately 37 square miles, and we have roughly 6 miles of coastline that does not include the Hammonasset State Park, which is Connecticut's largest state park. So we are lucky to have that in our community. We're being a small shoreline community, we're vulnerable to risks associated with climate-driven events, such as extreme heat, hurricanes, storm surges, rising sea levels, inland flooding, both riverine and tidal flooding. And we also experience some pluvial flooding from rain and storm events. We have had significant impacts from previous large storms, such as Superstorm Sandy in 2012, and multiple other coastal storm events. We have a significant number of community buildings, both residential and commercial buildings, located within the high-risk flood areas, both inland and coastal. And some of these include some major community assets that our town owned, such as our beach parks, one specifically known as the Surf Club in town that houses many fields for the schools, as well as our beach community buildings and gathering areas. So the town of Madison created a coastal resiliency plan back in 2016, and that was funded under a community block grant disaster recovery funding. And it was a little bit of a broader scale plan. It was in conjunction with some neighboring shoreline towns in Connecticut. And the town leaders, as well as some of our boards and commissions, specifically our Coastal Resiliency Commission, have expressed an interest in updating this plan, namely to take into consideration some new information, new assessments that can be done to identify our vulnerability and risks. Things such as sea level rise, climate vulnerability index. Our community is entirely septic system based community. We do not have any sewer systems, wastewater sewers, and part of our town is drinking individual private drinking water wells. So we wanted to include drinking water vulnerability assessment this time around, especially in some of our low-lying areas, those specific community neighborhoods. We wanted to look into some stormwater modeling, look at tidal wetland preservation along the shore, and we wanted to look into our historic and culturally significant properties and locations and determine their risks. And then, excuse me, and in doing so, we
Sarah, can you hear me? I think we might have lost Erin.
Okay, that's what happened. I wasn't sure if it was on my end.
Nope, I'm seeing people in the chat too. Uh-oh. Oh, yep, she disappeared. I bet she will pop back in as this
Okay,
all
hope
moves.
she
Yeah.
can pop back in. All right, we'll give her a couple minutes.
I apologize for that. I don't know if I if you lost just
Okay,
me or everyone
it was
for a
just
brief
you.
moment.
Wasn't sure. Go ahead and keep going. I
That's
think
odd. I apologize.
that's okay.
Okay, so we're kicking off our plan writing process. We have established a steering committee for Madison, which includes both some relevant staff, myself as a town planner, our town engineer, our emergency operations coordinator, as well as specific representatives from relevant boards and commissions, our chair of our Conservation Commission and our chair and another individual from our Coastal Resiliency Commission to help be in this working group to assist our consultants moving forward, whether it's town resources that are needed or just to help facilitate and identify some of those areas that we've recognized as problem areas throughout town, as well as identifying some residents and community members who could play a role in providing some historic knowledge of our community to aid in the plan writing process. So what we're going to do, we're going to begin our public engagement process and opportunities, which will include interviews as well as meetings and some workshops. We plan to create a vision and goals, which are going to guide us through our plan writing process. Our consultants are going to begin some field investigations and assessments of specific tidal wetland systems that we've identified early on as areas of concern in our community. And we will then use this information to understand our current vulnerabilities and risk levels, as well as be able to kind of inform which direction we should move forward. We're looking to establish a plan that includes actual implementation items that we can look at as a town to begin funding for, as well as opportunities to seek additional grant funding as Sarah had indicated, to move on to the next round to try to implement some of these ideas that we have to build the resilience within our community. Um, and I think lastly, one other added item that I don't think I spoke to earlier. I'm looking to make this information more accessible to our community, to increase some mapping components that we have here as resources, utilizing GIS and linking this plan back to existing plans, such as our plan of conservation and development, which is our master planning for our community, as well as our hazard mitigation plan. So I'm grateful for this opportunity for funding and really looking forward to developing this plan, building off of the work we've already have done, and looking forward to identifying some projects here for our town. Any
Thank you so
questions?
much, Erin. So I think since we lost a couple minutes, we are just going to move into Luke and Gideon's presentation and then do questions for both projects after that.
Excellent.
So yes, thank you so much, Erin. So now I'd like to introduce Reverend Gideon Pollock of St. John's Episcopal Church and Luke Gervasi, who is with GEI, who will present on St. John's Pond Conservation and Restoration Plan.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Luke, for being here with me and with us.
Of
Um,
course.
Luke, did we decide if I was going to start or you're going to start? I'm happy to start.
Sure. Why don't you go ahead, then I could kind of go over some
Great.
of the next slides as well.
Thanks, Luke. So my
Sure.
name's Gideon Pollock, and I'm the rector, which is to say the priest in charge or the priest charged with stewardship of St. John's Episcopal Church here in Cold Spring Harbor, New York, which is on the North Shore of Long Island. It's on Cold Spring Harbor is sort of a subset of the larger Oyster Bay watershed area, and our engagement with Long Island Sound Studies sort of came through a different approach, and maybe it's uh, different in a few ways. We have been the owners of St. John's Pond, which is a 14-acre pond for over 100 years. And our relationship to the pond has been really one of kind of passive ownership. And over the past several years, we've moved into a desire to have a more of a kind of stewarding relationship with the
Cash
pond.
on jurisdiction.
Oh, sorry. A sort of stewarding relationship with the pond, which for us grew out of a sort of desire to care for and nurture our relationship to this larger chunk of Long Island that we're a part of. And so this passive relationship kind of moved into a more active relationship through some work with GEI consultants, of which Luke is a part. It included an early watershed study of trying to understand where we sat in the larger watershed system. And we found that we're at the bottom of a very significant watershed that, of course, leads into Oyster Bay, Long Island Sound. And we also sort of had a growing awareness that our part of this watershed was particularly unhealthy. We knew that Cold Spring Harbor has a consistently failing grade for water quality, and that our marsh, which is a 6-acre marsh at the mouth of the harbor, probably could play an important role in resiliency here. And so we'd been active with the kind of Oyster Bay Cold Spring Harbor Protection Committee as volunteers. We've done some of the work in oyster gardening, but with Long Island Sound Studies help and with Luke's support, we're moving into a more active relationship of care for the health of the watershed. And I think that's kind of the appropriate place for me to pass off to you, Luke. If there's something I've missed or more that I should say, please let me know.
Sure. Thanks, Gideon. So, as is mentioned, my name is Luke Gervasi. I'm an ecologist and certified lake manager with GI Consultants in Huntington. And we are lucky enough to be working on this project with Gideon and the folks here and giving this consultant perspective of the program that is being administered here as well. Just some other project background with it too. The site was identified as an area of importance in a marsh conservation planning document for Oyster Bay and Cold Spring Harbor that was published by New Epic in 2023. If you've ever driven by the area, you probably know this church and the pond very well. It's really, really picturesque and a beautiful, really beautiful spot, but it also is dammed right by a major road corridor. So anyone who lives on Long Island, or probably even some of you folks in Connecticut, probably heard about a number of the dam failures in August when we had some very significant rains. So I definitely applaud Gideon and the rest of the group here for trying to get in front of some of that stuff and come up with a conservation and restoration plan and a conceptual design now before other problems really become an issue. Cold Spring Harbor is also listed, I believe it's on the 303D list for impaired water bodies, with E. coli being the pollutant factor there with the EPA. And yeah, just some other things. Sarah, if you go to the next slide as well, I'd like to get into some of that other stuff here. And Gideon, obviously, please feel free to add as we're speaking here. But some of the outcomes and next steps that we're looking to do is to develop this conservation restoration plan that is going to incorporate all the field data that we will be collecting as the consultant for this project. We're going to also involve, Erin kind of mentioned this as well, the big stakeholder engagement aspect of this and involving the public and other nonprofit groups in the management of this area to see how things want to move forward. A lot of this is conceptual, and we're coming up with what we want the next steps to be and what our goals and vision are as a project team. Another thing that's on here as well that has not been developed as of yet is to kind of develop a watershed association. So yes, this group might work on this project together now, but what about in the future? What we want to do as a consultant in writing this conservation plan and coming up with a conceptual design is make something that's feasible in the future and possible to get done in the future, as well as, set it up for additional funding so things can move forward and keep improving with this valuable resource. Gideon, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, happy to add a little bit more. I mean, we know that we have a variety of structures as well as the concerns about pond health. When we've looked into this work, thanks to Luke and his partners there, we've realized that over time the health of our pond is not naturally getting better; it's naturally getting worse. It's the water quality is declining, and so but we don't have any data on it, and so we also didn't have the capacity to get any data on it. We're just we're a church on the North Shore of Long Island. We don't have any citizen science specialties, so we're really excited that our capacity to do this project has been really enhanced through this grant, and we're really looking forward to getting a lot more information about actionable steps that we can take both to prepare for future weather events, but also to prepare to remediate the quality of the pond using sort of natural I was going to say sort of natural processes, right? We don't want to do anything that's too mechanical. We want to kind of be at peace with nature and use nature to heal nature. So we're really looking forward to that. I think we don't know if this is the first step in many, but we know we have some issues to address with our dam, as well as with the possibility of a kind of navigable fish passage to allow species that go from salt to freshwater to be able to navigate. And we just are really excited about all the possibilities that are open to us that we could not have known were available to us without the help of this grant. So thanks to Sarah and her team for supporting us, coming alongside. I would also say that the process has been collaborative, the process has been mutual, and really Sarah and her team have been super supportive in helping us to identify goals and successfully navigate towards them. So I just want to really commend her team and this process to all of you who are thinking about it. And thanks as well to Luke for his constant support.
Words, and thank you, Luke. So I do think we have a couple minutes for questions. If anybody would like to ask a question of either Erin or Luke and Gideon about their project. This session, we do have a couple minutes set aside for this. Also, if you have any questions about the planning support program in general, please let us know. If you put your question in the chat, we'll be able to hopefully answer it. And I do just want to remind everybody that the details for these projects are located on our assistance programs page. A link to that is in the chat. You can also find it on our website. There's either the award slate you can review or the interactive map to learn a little bit more.
There's a great question about the source of water at St. John's Pond from Russ in the chat.
Yes, go ahead.
So we did, as I mentioned, we did a few years ago, we did a watershed study with GEI. And what we identified is that the pond is, of course, naturally spring-fed. There is an old river that is kind of now part of this lake system that used to come through, as well as springs. But we get a lot of rain runoff from a pretty big watershed. So it's a combination of runoff as well as fresh water from springs and from an old river. Isn't that right, Luke?
Just add quickly to that, there's a pretty large wetland system that kind of runs into it as well that has another dammed up area a little bit farther upstream. It's also in one of the few slopey and high areas of Long Island. There's not that many hills for us here, but it's an area that actually does have a pretty significant slope where a lot of rainwater does really, gush down and go into the pond as well.
There's not a tidal connection to the pond. It's a one-way connection. It's an outflow from the pond to the harbor. There's about what would you say, Luke, a 12-foot, a 15-foot height difference between the pond edge and the harbor?
I just looking at it the other day on the dam inventory. I believe it's a 12-foot drop.
Thanks, Gideon and Luke. And then I do see one more question for Erin from Judy Benson. Once the plan is created, what will the process be for adoption by the town?
Sure. Thanks, Judy. The town, our Coastal Resiliency Commission is appointed through our Board of Selectmen. And so ultimately our board will be overseeing this, the entirety of drafting this plan, and ultimately will be the agency that adopts the plan.
Okay, great. Okay, so in the interest of time, I think I'm just going to move on to our next session, but these presenters will be on for the remainder of this session. And if you do have any questions for them, please just feel free to put them in the chat. Okay, so the next portion of this presentation is going to focus on the Long Island Sound Resilience Grant Writing Assistance Program. The intent of this is to facilitate the hiring of grant preparation and writing support to assist with the development of grant applications for sustainable and resilient focused projects that will impact communities within or partially within the Long Island Sound coastal boundary. Our aim is to reduce staffing and capacity barriers that municipalities and community organizations might have when applying to competitive funding opportunities. So you can use this support to get help with budget preparation, cost benefit analysis, writing and narrative development, mapping, application preparation and submission. This program has been open since November of 2022. It's open on a rolling basis. There is no deadline to apply, and the funding, it's open until the funding is all allocated. We do say that you should apply to our grant writing assistance program at least 8 weeks prior to when your targeted grant is due. So you have time to set up the contract with Cornell or University of Connecticut in advance of that grant application being due. The award amount is up to $9,950 per application directly to the contractor. Each application should focus on one discrete project, and applicants can submit multiple applications for separate projects now. So if there's multiple projects that you're interested in getting grant funding for, you can submit multiple applications. And there's no match required. And again, you can apply through a simple Google form or printing out a application document, filling it out and submitting it over email or mail. The program is essentially a grant to get a grant. So we are, happy to work with you to discuss, what funding opportunity might be best for you, and talk through some details of your project. So the types of projects that are eligible is pretty wide ranging. We support grant applications for projects in the planning, design, or implementation phase. There's more detail in the RFP, but this is just a list of the types of projects that we envision supporting through this program. So resilience plans, green infrastructure projects, improvements to infrastructure, right sizing of culverts, dam removal, nature-based solutions, retreat relocation, land acquisition, public engagement, or community engagement. And this is just a list of the application questions. We're really just looking to get a sense of what you're trying to accomplish. And you would also need to identify the funding opportunity or opportunities that you're looking to apply for with this support. And you also need to identify the contractor that you would like to work with to apply for that grant. You need to identify project location, how that project will advance sustainability and resilience in your community, the project type, or activities that you're looking to do when you get that grant funding, your project team, and then some optional questions that we have in there are just about some past community or stakeholder engagement, relevant grant application history, and any other supporting documentation you'd like to include. How do you apply? This is very similar to our planning support program. There's a Google form, as I said. There's a fillable application document that you can email or mail. There is also an example application you can view to understand the answers you might want to put in for these the questions in the application. There's also a link to our funding database within the grant application and the RFP so that you can view the available funding opportunities that are out right now or will be out in the future. There's also some information about the contractors that might be of interest to you to work with for this. We do not require you to work with a specific set of contractors. You are free to use whatever contractor that you're comfortable with for this program. So to repeat a common theme, all of the projects need to benefit communities within the Long Island Sound watershed coastal boundary. So if your entity or your organization is outside of that boundary, the project just needs to benefit a community within. You can list, as I said, multiple grants you would like to apply for. So say you want to apply for 2 grants for one project, you would need to work with your contractor to make sure your budget is under $9,950 to get that grant writing support. If you have another project you would like support for to apply for a grant, you can submit an additional application, a separate application for that. I believe I just covered that. And then just a summary of where we're at with our support so far. So over the past couple of years, we've received 39 applications. We've made 24 awards. And that support that we've distributed is about $218,000. We have a success rate of about 25% on the projects that we are funding. And so now I'd like to get into the session where we're going to highlight some of the projects that have gotten our grant writing assistance support and then actually were successful in getting their targeted grant. So I'm going to introduce our first our panel here. First, we're going to have John Dilley, who's the president of the Mill River Wetland Committee. He's going to be talking about grant writing assistance to support public engagement by delivering Mill River Wetland Committee's River Lab programs in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Next, we'll have Michael Fiorentino, who is with Nassau Cornell Cooperative Extension. He's going to be presenting on grant writing assistance to support building volunteer-driven oyster restoration on Long Island Sound. And then we'll have Jane Jackson, who's the Director of Stewardship with the North Shore Land Alliance. She's going to present on stormwater management through green infrastructure and habitat restoration at Shore Road Sanctuary. And finally, Beth Sutherland, who is the Treasurer of Rewild Long Island. She's going to present Growing Wildly. And the grant writer, Liz Skolnick, who they used to apply to grants, is actually also going to be available on this call for questions. So without further delay, John, I'm going to let you go into a little bit more detail about your project.
Thank you, Sarah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to kind of share what we learned and how maybe it could benefit others in support of Long Island Sound. As you said, I'm the president of the Mill River Wetland Committee. We're a local nonprofit here in Fairfield, Connecticut that's been around for just over 50 years. Our founder still lives here in town, Joy Shaw. She still participates actively in our activities and the guidance of our educational programs. So what we were looking to do is we were trying to get a grant from the Long Island Sound Community Impact Fund. that would allow us to expand our educational programs into Bridgeport and into areas that have not had educational experiences like we have in Fairfield. So we are a very small nonprofit. Again, as I mentioned, very focused on education. We run educational trips for second graders, fourth graders, fifth and seventh graders in all of the public schools and a few of the private schools here in Fairfield. And we educate about 3,000 students a year. And the information that we provide them starts with biodiversity in second grade and then moves on to things like erosion and groundwater. And then in seventh grade, we take them down to the estuary here in Fairfield, and we explain to them the impact of upriver activities to Long Island Sound. So we saw an opportunity to do this in Bridgeport at a school, the Barnum School. One of our board members has a son who teaches there, and we approached them to see if we could talk to them about the impact of Bridgeport and a very impervious surface area on the Yellow Mill Channel and therefore Long Island Sound. We did a budget, and we put together an estimate of all the costs, including transportation, materials, trip leaders, all the things that we need to do. Came out to about $26,000 in order to have 2 fifth grade classes. Where this grant writing assistance came in so important, it was that we've never done a grant really at any size in many years, at least for the current board members. So we didn't know where to start. So as Sarah said, applying for a grant to get help to do a grant sounded crazy, but it was exactly what we needed. So if you want to, so you can see here a picture of some of the kids from the Barnum School, by the way, on the top right-hand side. But maybe the next slide, Sarah. So one of the things that, our grant writing person, so we filled out the form, we submitted the project plan as Sarah outlined previous here at the top, and we were granted a grant, and it came through, and they gave us a handful of people to choose from that they had vetted as grant writers. We selected one and met with them, had some great conversations, and found the right fit, somebody who understood what we were trying to achieve. So I think, some tips for success, and I know this is something we wanted to touch upon, was the scope. We had a really big eyes and a small, we'll say, eyes were too big for our stomach at first. So we had to pare it back. And with the help of the grant writer, we were able to do that kind of very methodically without losing the power of our program. And I think that that allowed us to also explore other ways that the grant writer could help us. For example, the grant writer helped us by drafting example letters of support from some of the organizations that we might partner with and getting their support that we could attach to our grant application. These are things that we would never have considered unless we had worked with a grant writer. Some other things I would say that were important that we learned were being very exhaustive in thinking about who you're going to work with, what processes you're going to use, and what tools or systems or software you're going to need to achieve your project, your outcome. Sometimes you take for granted what you do and you say, oh, well, we know we have these tools or we have these people on staff, but you're doing it in a new location with a different educational student pool. You're having to do transportation, things like that. So you had to really think through every step of the process, down to porta potties and bus rentals. So we had to really think about that, and the grant writer helped us think about all the line items that went into what we needed to put in our proposal. Again, solid partnerships, as I mentioned. Our grant writer helped us put together letters so that they could basically just modify it, at a very small level, and we'd have some consistency in their support for our application for the grant. So helping us identify the right partners, why we need partners. Again, in this case, it was to drive staying power in the Bridgeport community. We don't want to do this once. We want to keep doing this and expanding it in Bridgeport from an environmental justice perspective. And then, the grant writer can just be helpful with how we put together different pieces of verbiage in the grant as well. we would write things about our program and they'd say, yeah, listen, you got to think about this term. You got to think about positioning it this way, or you have to understand if you use the word, survey or evaluation, it's going to trigger something with the EPA. And so there were a lot of really incredible tips that we got from working with a grant writer that not on our best day, everybody on the board would have come up with. I also want to say, and I think it's kind of to close, is you're seeing the support of Sarah and her team here, as well as the Long Island Sound Study team. Everybody, including the Restore America's Estuaries with LISCIF, who supported our grant, went out of their way to make sure that they could help us through this process. They knew that we were working our way from being solely an educational entity in Fairfield to trying to understand how we can bring more of our skills to an environmental justice arena, and their guidance and their support for this was just incalculable. So I think that's all I had to present, Sarah.
Thank you so much, John. Yes. So if you do have a question for John, please hold it and we'll do questions for all the panelists at the end of this session. Thanks. We're going to move on to Michael.
Thank you, Sarah. My name is Mike Fiorentino. I'm from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Nassau County. And we were very fortunate to receive some grant writing assistance to apply for the Long Island Sound Studies Futures Fund last year. And we did successfully receive a $250,000 award to allow us to help develop training resources to support volunteer oyster gardening initiatives across the Long Island Sound. On the next slide here, the most important tip that I would give to anybody to be successful in projects is to involve community collaborations and partnerships. These could be stakeholders who are very closely aligned with the project that you're planning. It could also be community members who live in the areas that are affected by the project, or other nonprofit organizations, or anyone really, who could help contribute to the success of the project. And the more people that you have working with you on this project, the more people you have to help promote the successes and, share those rewards as well with others. Other things that I would encourage people to keep in mind when planning their projects is to establish their partnerships early in the planning process. As we're putting together these ideas for these projects, we want to make sure that we're incorporating as many different voices as possible into the development process. Oftentimes, when you start speaking with one person, they know another person. They say, oh, you should reach out to this person. You really need to work with this person. And your group quickly grows. And that allows you to incorporate a lot of different perspectives in your projects and think of things that you haven't thought of before. Also incorporating mechanisms for community members to provide input into the project during the development process, but also post-award when you're executing the contract. This could be establishing community advisory groups for those specific projects. This could be hosting public information sessions for residents who, especially when these projects are taking place in their backyards, to come to listen to narratives about what this project is, how it will affect them, and just open up the conversation for their voices and perspectives as well, because they can capture some very valuable information from them. Also, as you're putting together this project scope, think big picture. Think about what could be the solution to this issue that we're having here. That can include multiple facets and a lot of different opportunities that you could explore. And then from there, obviously, we have limited budgets. We can't accomplish everything, but narrowing down your priorities into what's going to be the most impactful. It's still going to be a stepping stone into helping you reach your overall goal. But especially if you can't accomplish it all at once, figuring out what the most effective first step would be is going to be very important. And then other pieces of information is just to be mindful of any permits or environmental review processes that may be necessary to complete your project, and incorporating some buffer time in there. An example that I'll give with that, with our Futures Fund proposal or the project, we have to submit a quality assurance project plan, or a QAP. And we had some delays in getting our QAP approved. We submitted our initial draft. It was a couple months before we got our comments. We submitted another version. There was another couple months before we actually received the approved QAP. Fortunately for us, we weren't proposing to do any data collection until the second year of our project, so it didn't cause us any major delays. But if it was a project that, we needed to begin doing data collection immediately, that would have threw off our timeline. And if we didn't have any flexibility in our project timeline to be able to complete the project, we would have been in a bit of some trouble there. So just making sure that there's flexibility there to be able to complete everything you said you were going to be doing within the contract period.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, some very helpful tips, I think.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to note that on our website we have a resilience planning guide, which does include some major questions that are useful to ask yourself as you're working through your project. So I think we'll put that in the chat in a little bit so you all can review it. But next, I'm going to pass it off to Jane Jackson, who's the Director of Stewardship for the North Shore Land Alliance.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, we are North Shore Land Alliance is a 21-year-old land trust based on Western Long Island. And we acquired a shoreline property in Cold Spring Harbor from ExxonMobil in 2013, I think it was, or 2012. It was a former fuel oils terminal, and they took it out of operation and remediated the site, and then considered a number of possible recipients to donate the property to. And we ended up acquiring the property at that time. And they seeded the site with native grasses, and it's now the site for a maritime grassland. And we've done some additional enhancements on the property. And it's a beautiful site, but it's subject to a lot of stormwater runoff from a very steep winding road across the street. And we've had a gully created by some of the runoff at a corner of the northern boundary of the preserve, where we share a boundary with a paved road, as you can see on that right-hand photo, with a local beach club. So we have made the Grant Writing Assistance Program was a wonderful partner to help be able to acquire partnership with a consultant that had more expertise than we did about implementing a solution. So, we applied for a water quality improvement program grant in the category of marine district habitat restoration, because in addition to a focus on green infrastructure to absorb stormwater, we are also restoring some of the habitat along the shoreline adjacent to the gully that was created in this rainstorm a number of years ago. So if we can go to the next slide, Sarah, please. So I will be echoing John and Michael in some of these responses here. I think, yes, it's really important to be clear about your objectives and goals and try to be realistic about what can be accomplished. And that is one area where the consultant can really help you fine-tune those objectives and be a huge help with that. They know, they do these projects all the time, and in some cases the consultants, they wear many hats. They can be sort of a jack of all trades. They also have work with these grants a lot of the time, so they're instrumental in shaping the project that can be done. I think another thing to keep in mind is to try to be ready for the complexity of government grants. If you are applying for a government grant, we've found that, it's a 67-page contract that we have with the DEC, and I felt like we kind of needed an attorney to help navigate that, and also navigate aspects like progress reporting and bidding and protocols for bidding and hiring. And again, the grant writer can be enormously helpful in helping with that process. I think if you can stay in contact with the grant writer, stay in very close contact with the grant writer, I think most people probably do this, but as the application is being developed, that's critical. It's, and we as the project manager, of course, are, it's, we have to be able to understand the RFP as much as the grant writer does, if not more. So it's important to stay on top of that relationship and the grant application and implementation process itself. And, if possible, find a writer or a consultant that you can continue to work with after the grant is secured, because they can create a really wonderful bridge from securing funding to implementation of the work. I wish I could speak to how the implementation has gone. We found out about a year ago that our grant application was successful, but we have yet to finalize the contract. So that leads to my last point about things to know about applying for the funding opportunity is to be patient. And it may take some time to finalize a contract and start the work. So it's important to have a project that's flexible enough to ride out unexpected delays. And one last thing I want to mention too, though, was the importance of partnerships. Again, as John and Michael had mentioned, we've been fortunate enough to work with the local village and the neighbors on the property before we even have launched the grant. We've had preliminary meetings, and we will be expanding that community once we start implementation of the grant. So. I'm just very grateful for the grant writing assistance program, because it provided that kick in the pants and support to really get this proposal done. So thank you for that.
We are going to have Beth Sutherland from Rewild, Long Island, and Liz Skolnick will be available for questions as well. Go ahead, Beth.
Sarah, did you put my poll up or not?
Oh, I was going to do that at the end. Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd planned around it being at the beginning, but that's okay.
We can launch it right now. We can launch it right now if you'd like.
Okay. All right. That would be
There
great.
you go.
Thank you. Yeah, so the question is, as you look at native plant gardens and in your neighborhood, do you have native plant gardens in your neighborhood? Are they, yes, but only at your house? Do you have some neighbors growing natives? Are there some public spaces near you? Or no, there's only conventional plantings, or I'm not sure, or other. You can share in the chat. So is this, I can't see answers at this point.
Yep, they're rolling in. I'm gonna give people maybe like 20 more seconds to answer.
Okay.
And then I'll end it and we'll show the answers.
Great.
Some people are sharing in the chat.
More seconds.
Okay. All right, so it looks like there are some good public spaces, and with this audience, I would have expected definitely people to have native plant gardens at their houses. and some neighbors. But the reason I wanted to frame it this way is that there are a lot of organizations who are encouraging homeowners to make changes to their landscaping practices. We know that the sterile landscapes are contributing to all sorts of problems, many of them described here today. And Rewild Long Island is one of the organizations that is trying to make native plant gardens visible to people, so that they can see what their garden might look like if they start to make changes. To do that, we have two programs, two primary programs that we run. One is the Community Gardens program, where we work with groups of community gardeners who are interested in putting a native plant garden in, and they will plant them and maintain them. They commit to maintaining them for at least 2 years. And those are in public sites, ranging from schools to houses of worship to historical houses and town facilities, a variety of different sites. We also have our summer program to fight hunger and climate change, which brings in high school students who are interested, and they work with a lot of partner nonprofits to plant and tend gardens, remove invasives, and plant and grow food that they donate to local food banks. So this is how we have been starting to change minds. And we got some really great startup funding, local startup funding to run these programs. But in 2023, we got the grant writing assistance program, which allowed us to pay Liz, who had been involved with us earlier, to apply to NIFWIF's Long Island Sound Future Fund. And we were successful in getting that grant. So that grant has enabled us to kind of grow wildly. We spent, 2.5 times as much. We were able to dedicate 2.5 times as much funding to these programs as we had in 2023. So we were very successful with that application, which really helped us. And I resonate with Jane's comment about it does kind of take some time to get going with the contract and everything, not as long as it's taking with Jane, but it did take us probably a good 6 months to get everything in place. But with this funding, we have been able to go out and actually install 34 gardens, spreading from Queens out to Montauk and the North Fork, across Long Island. This year, most of them were in that NIFWIF watershed coastal boundary site. And we are actually currently interviewing for 2025 gardens for the next, I guess the application's open for another 5 days for that, for community gardens. In 2024, we also were able to use the grant writing assistance program, and here it was less successful. The first grant we applied for, we did not get awarded. The second one we thought was going to open up, and it actually never did open up. We found a third one and applied for that third one, and we're waiting to hear on that one. So if you could turn the page, Sarah. My tips for success are very similar to everyone else's. First thing is pick an opportunity that's a good fit for you, both aspirational and attainable. And so when I think about the first grant that we got, the NIFWIF one that really allowed us to expand tremendously, those were doing programs that we already knew how to run. We just wanted to run more of it and make it bigger. So we aspired to do a lot more than we were currently doing, but we knew it was attainable because we knew the basic mechanisms we needed to do to make it work. Very similar. Well, I guess one of the things that was important for us, I think, was display a track record of using the funds for successful outcomes in prior projects. So we had this funding that we used from other local funders obviously a lot less money, but it would allowed us to run some projects. And in the course of that, we also developed a solid network of partners and other funders. So when we went into that successful grant application, we had a lot of partners in there, and we were able to show our kind of startup funders and the fact that we had been successful with that as well. Just from a grant writing application process, just make sure that you have a clear and concise answer to every question in the grant. Put yourself in the head of the poor people who have to read all these applications. And you want to make it easy for them. You want to make sure you answer the question and you're not pointing people off to other areas. And then be flexible. I think several people have touched on this. Things change. And again, we've found the Grant Writing Assistance Program very flexible and very supportive of what we needed to acquire. So I did tuck some pictures in from some of our master gardeners watering to an elementary school planting out a new native plant garden, another new native plant garden getting planted in a library, beach cleanup with the teenager program, and then 3 teenagers proudly harvesting their first squash for the year. So basically, as you think about opportunities, kind of, where can you demonstrate that track record of success, and kind of be flexible and have those partnerships, very similar to what other people have noted as reasons for success. Well, thank you, Sarah.
Beth, sorry about the delay on the poll, but I'm glad we were able to put that up. And so now we have time, about 10 minutes for Q&A for all of the panelists. So John, Mike, Jane, and Beth. I know we have a question in the chat maybe already for Jane. So Paul Stacy asks, the erosion looks severe. Was expanding the floodplain width part of the solution to dissipate erosive flow energy along with a vegetated buffer fix? How wide of a buffer zone did you establish? Has it stabilized?
It hasn't stabilized yet because we haven't started implementing the program yet. So it's we still need to do all the installation that's supposed to start by next fall, we're hoping. So it's but we have a design in place. And another aspect of this that I didn't mention was just wanted to add this is the part of the help that was so instrumental from our consultant was they were able to measure the size of the watershed and the flow, and so they were able to help create a design that would capture that. But we also through an earlier grant had a tidal wetlands permit secured from the DEC. So that, unfortunately, we did not get the grant at the time, but the permit has helped us make the project a little bit more shovel ready when the design is finalized. So I think that may have been a selling point also.
Thanks, Jane.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for the panelists? I think a general question I think maybe I would all want you to go into a little bit more detail on is, how are you using or plan to use kind of your success from past grant awards to, expand your programs, your organization, and then potentially use those grants to leverage funds or capacity to apply for additional grants. I think we see sometimes, getting that first big grant is really a way to open the door to applying to additional grants. I know, Beth, you went into a little bit more about that in your presentation, but maybe others, if you want to provide some example
Yeah,
or detail.
I can talk about that if you want. There's
Sure.
also a question in the chat for me as well. So, this grant is, again, we're a very small nonprofit. Our annual operating budget is if we're lucky, at $60,000. Our primary funding sources come from the Board of Education here in Fairfield, because that's the yeoman's amount of the 3,000 kids we put through the program every year. But it has shown us that we can expand, and we have to do it cautiously, because we can't overstretch our volunteers and some of our curriculum developers. But it has set the table for us to go back to LISCIF and say, okay, well, we did the 5th grade, it worked, we figured out the logistics, we got a working relationship with the principal now. Let's go to 2nd, 4th, and 7th grade. So we just basically reapplied to the recent opening for the Restore America's Estuaries grant again, and we're going to repeat the 5th grade, and it's a 2-year grant this year. So as a result, the kids that we had in the 5th grade will have in the 7th grade program. So they'll have those foundational elements before they get to the estuary. And whereas if we do the 4th grade, and the 2nd grade, we'll have them for the 4th grade and the 5th grade. So we'll start to see some momentum inside that school, which is very exciting for us. And then we can turn around to the greater Bridgeport Board of Ed and say, listen, this is really important in the city. We'd like to move outside of this one school. But I think that this grant has allowed us to expand, I think cautiously, and also understand how to repeat that. So we did that very quickly. Whereas again, last year we needed all the help we could find. This year we did it kind of on our own. And the question will be then internally, how do we scale? Because we've already had, after we've presented this a couple of times, we've had inquiries from the Quinnipiac watershed. We've had inquiries from other places that want to bring our programs to schools in those areas. So this has been a springboard for us.
Great, John.
Yeah, that's my roommate. She's Madeline. We call her Madeline. Yeah.
Oh, okay, there we go. Mike, you would like to add to that?
Yes, I'll go quickly to answer your question. The reason why we had applied for the Grant Writing Assistance Program, and as a reminder, our project was to help establish community oyster gardening projects. At the time, we didn't have anyone on our team who had that contents expertise in oyster gardening or aquaculture in general. So we were able to utilize the Grant Writing Assistance Program to hire a contractor who did have the time at that point then, since we were paying him, to dive deep into engaging with different stakeholders, learning more about what is required. He acted as a liaison between us and other contractors that we were looking to work with through this project here. And now that we've received the grant funding for this project, we were able to hire a full-time aquaculture specialist at Cornell Cooperative Extension. And now that we have that person in place with that content expertise, that's going to allow us to help to continue to grow upon this even after our grant funding ends, because now we do have an in-house expert on this topic that will allow us to continue to grow.
Great. Thanks, Mike. So I do have another question in the chat for Beth, from Paul Stacy. For rewilding, should we be looking for changing regimes and mixes of vegetation caused by development, cultured vegetative preferences, and climate change? A new definition of wild, perhaps, that fills vacated niches from lost foundational species. We see the northward migration of southern species, for example.
Yeah, this is such a hot topic, a great topic. Yeah, at Rewild, we are not purists. Our goal is to, plant, mostly native straight species that are native to Long Island. But we will mix in a few other things as well. But again, the goal is to support the wildlife that is here now. And so we are trying to create something that looks visually pleasant to humans, So using kind of human-centered design principles for gardens, but using native plants to fulfill the elements of that design, but also trying to address functional issues, right? We have one site that we're working on in Setauket that has a lot of water issues. And so we're picking plants to kind of fill that function to try to help them filter through the water and manage some of their low-level flooding kind of issues. It's a great big question. But we're trying to be practical and get things in the ground now. So I appreciate the question. No.
Thank you, Beth. So I think we're kind of rounding towards the end of this session. I do have one more question in the chat that I think I'm going to ask while you all are doing this last closing poll or set of closing polls. So now that you've heard more about the Grant Writing Assistance Program and the Planning Support Program, we just wanted to get a sense of if you're going to be interested in taking advantage of them. Maybe yes, definitely. Maybe I need a little bit more information, or no. So we'd like to get your feedback here. And then while you all are answering that, this final question from Kyle Hill is for Luke and Gideon for the Cold Spring Harbor Marsh Project. So you mentioned removing invasive species and planting natives. What did you have planned for maintenance?
Yeah, we did build into the timeline for the grant and the project for its monitoring by both our consultant and staff for a certain number of years, and then and maintenance with staff and volunteers and replacement if necessary. There's a possibility of securing future funding for replacement if necessary, and a certain level of success. I don't remember the exact number, but a certain percentage of plants that survive a certain period, and it's built over 5 to 10 years. So.
Thanks, Jane. Apologies. Thought that question was for the other project, but you are probably correct.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jane.
Sure. Oh, right.
No problem.
Cold Spring Harbor.
So let's go Cold Spring Harbor. Yeah, we don't have any natives in this part of the project.
Okay. Thanks, Gideon. Okay. So yes, if you all could just fill out these polls about your interest in maybe utilizing these programs in the future, or the planning support program now, as it is open from December 6th through February 7th. And I'm just going to click to the next slide, but you all should continue, be able to continue to answer these questions as I click. And then, just some feedback from you all. So we went over these support programs that we have available now, but we're always interested in getting feedback from you all. These programs were developed to meet the needs of communities. So if there are any adjustments or additional types of support that you all think would be helpful, we can take that all into consideration as we adjust these programs or create new ones. You'll be able to interact with this poll. It's an open-ended question, so you just type in your answer. And if there are answers that someone else puts in here, you can upvote them and indicate that you agree. Help with required match. Yeah, that's a big one. Okay, 2 people like that, so. All right, well, yes, if you don't have, your idea fully formed now, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can set up a conversation or, communicate over email. Oh, we have some additional responses, clear understanding of what's available, additional phases from planning, final design and construction. Okay. Thank you. So, now, I know we went through a lot today on this session, and it was a lot of information. I want to thank our presenters so much for providing their experiences and tips and, just other stories that they like to pass along. I think it's very helpful to communicate how these programs work. If you'd like to set up a time to speak with one of these Sustainable and Resilient Communities Extension professionals about either of these support programs, grant writing assistance or planning support, and how you can take advantage of them, please put your name and email in the chat, and we will get back to you soon and try to set up a time to talk, in whatever format works best for you. And if you'd like to just directly email one of us, if you have one of our emails on hand, go ahead and do that too. But if you want to take the time now to just express your interest, that would be great. And Sarah Powell, I am not able to click forward. There you go. Okay. All right. So thank you all for your time today. Thank you so much to the presenters, Erin, Luke, Gideon, John, Mike, Jane, Beth, and Liz for being on and sharing your experiences. Just a reminder, this session will be recorded and shared out afterwards. If you are interested in hearing more from us, we will have a session later this afternoon at 1:30 p.m. that is going to focus on resilience tools that are developed in the Long Island Sound watershed and can be used within the Long Island Sound coastal watershed. So you can still register for that session if you're interested. And then tomorrow on the 11th at 10 a.m., we are going to have a session planning for inundation. So you'll hear from communities and regional entities that are considering different aspects of planning for inundation, including buyout programs, land use policies, and community perspectives on retreat relocation. So if you are interested in any of that content, please do register. If you don't have time, you can check out the recordings afterwards. So thank you all for your time today. It's been fantastic.